Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. Today's video is going to be my review of the new summon showcase, Dragonyule Defenders, and with a new showcase review comes a new giveaway. There's a Gleam link in the description below, and this giveaway is going to last 1 week, so be sure to take a look and enter. But back to the topic of Dragonyule Defenders, this is our second time-limited showcase in the game, meaning that certain holiday characters on this showcase are not going to be added to the normal summoning pool after it ends. This is similar to what we saw with Halloween Fantasia, and in this case, the showcase lasts from December 17th to December 30th. Now, spoiler alert, I think this is a great showcase, but we're going to get into exactly why. Here are the timestamps on screen now if you wish to skip ahead. We're going to take a look at every single thing on this showcase that's been given a rate up. That includes all of the new Wyrmprints, Dragon, and Adventurers, and as well as the old Dragon and Wyrmprint that have a rate up too. And at the end, I'll give a verdict with a review score for the first time, so I hope you look forward to that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this showcase, starting with the first Wyrmprint, the 3-star focus, Roast Feast. Roast Feast has recovery potency and also increases your ornament intake for the duration of the current facility event. As with most 3-star Wyrmprints, this one is not very good, and actually its ability is identical to that of the Wyrmprint Winds of Saint Latier and the Wyrmprint Halo. All three of these are functionally identical, except for that Astral Ornament part on Roast Feast. So basically, I think this Wyrmprint you only really want for the duration of the event for that second ability, and afterward, it's probably a better idea just to sell it for Eldwater, especially when you consider if you played the last facility event, you'll have the Wyrmprint Luis's Hobbies, which was a free 5-star that provides much more recovery potency, more stats, and is just overall a better option. Moving on, the second Wyrmprint featured on this showcase is Trove of Knowledge. This is an old Wyrmprint, but it's been given a rate up, and unfortunately, just like Roast Feast, I feel like this one is a bit of a miss. The two abilities on Trove of Knowledge are Stun Res and Win Res. These are okay. It is nice that Stun Res gets up to 25% once this is max unbound, because that means a 3-star adventurer who only has Stun Res up to 75%, even once fully promoted, they can actually hit that 100% and not have to worry about stun for the most part. However, I just think that being a defensive Wyrmprint, this doesn't have a lot of applications. If you're fighting against Midgard Stormer, for instance in the Dragon Trials, you probably don't need this unless you're really early on, and even then there's a Great Worm Midgard Stormer Wyrmprint that will also provide Wind Res. And if you're fighting against the High Dragon or advanced version of Midgard Stormer, you basically have to use the Glorious Tempest Wyrmprint I've shown here, since that provides resistance to the damage not just of Wind but of Midgard Stormer himself. So for that reason, I think Trove of Knowledge is a bit weak. Also, the next Wyrmprint up, Saintly Delivery, which is new to the showcase and new to the game, is also going to provide the same amount of stun res and is just kind of a better general Wyrmprint. So for that reason, I think Trove of Knowledge, not really what you're looking for on this showcase. Moving on to Saintly Delivery, like I said, Saintly Delivery provides the same amount of stun res as Trove of Knowledge, but the second ability is much more generally useful, skill damage of 10 or 15%. And while those are pretty small percentages of skill damage, that's going to always be relevant, especially on characters with 2 attacking skills. And I just have to say the artwork on this Wyrmprint is amazing. It's also going to help your ornament grind for the duration of the current facility event. So I do think this is one that's pretty good as a pickup. If you can max unbind it, it is a nice tack on to any adventure you're running when you fear stun and you want to make sure they have 100% stun res or at least some stun res. Once again, we can compare it to Trove of Knowledge. So if you already have Trove of Knowledge max unbound and for whatever reason you're really worried about stun, you probably don't need Saintly Delivery. The skill damage is lower than on something like Plunder Pals. The other comparison I'd make is to another kind of middle of the road Wyrmprint, Sisters of the Anvil. Sisters of the Anvil provides strength double buff as well as stun res, but the stun res on Sisters of the Anvil only goes up to 20%. So you're getting more out of Saintly Delivery, and I think with skill damage versus strength double buff, you're getting a more universally relevant second ability too. So I do like Saintly Delivery a bit more. Definitely not a premier Wyrmprint or one of the top offensive options as a 4-star, but it's also one that I wouldn't be unhappy to summon, and like I said, the artwork is just too cute on this. After that, we get to our first 5-star Wyrmprint, A Wish Upon the Yule Tree, and this Wyrmprint is kind of unique. It's really the first defense-oriented 5-star Wyrmprint we have in the game. It's going to provide an increase to defense when your HP is above 70%, and it's also going to provide the healing double buff ability. So what that does is whenever you receive a defense buff, you're going to gain some HP regen for 20 seconds, so you do need a defensive buffer on your team for that to work. However, that first ability is similar to something we just saw on Pia on the last showcase. That's going to make some units very tanky and very hard to take down. I think this is actually pretty powerful on tanks. Anyone with high HP who's sort of in the fray and wants that healing on the second ability, especially if you have the right team comp to potentially trigger that multiple ways with multiple defensive buffs, this is a pretty powerful Wyrmprint and definitely unique. Actually, the comparisons here are even a bit loose because Cleo's Ruse and Give Me Your Wounded, while having similar amounts of stats, are really focused on healing. You do get some last defense from Cleo's Ruse, and Give Me Your Wounded, you do get some defense at full HP, but I don't think these are even really comparable to a Wish Upon a Yule Tree, so I do think this is a pretty unique Wyrmprint, and for that reason, one I wouldn't be unhappy to summon. Okay, and our final Wyrmprint for today is the Prince of Dragonyule, and this marks the return of something we saw last showcase, where certain abilities on the Wyrmprint would be limited to certain elements of Adventurer. In this case, the Flurry Devastation ability only works if the equipped adventurer is water element. Otherwise, this Wyrmprint provides critical damage of 13 or 15%, and then that Flurry Devastation, when the combo count is 15 or more, you're going to get 8 or 10% if max unbound, extra critical rate, and then Holiday Cheer, just like on the last Wyrmprint, and a number of those on this showcase. These are just going to help your facility grind. After that, they're going to go away and be irrelevant. This, however, is a pretty good Wyrmprint, and one I think will stay relevant even outside the context of the current facility event. The obvious comparison is to Levin's Champion, because Levin's Champion also provides critical damage and critical rate up with a certain HP threshold. However, Levin's Champion, the beauty of it is partially that it's good on any adventurer. The unfortunate thing about the Prince of Dragonyule is, if you invest heavily into this and max unbind it, it's only going to be relevant for your water adventurers. That said, it is strong. If one of your favorite adventurers is a dagger unit like Orsum, Luther, or the new Holiday Cleo, this would be a very good Wyrmprint for them. It's just the trade-off you'll face with Levin's Champion is a bit rough. The other thing is you could always use something like Resounding Rendition, which just provides skill damage and is also going to interact with criticals. It's just a powerful pick that could go on pretty much any unit. So that's the real weakness I see in the Prince of Dragonyule. It's definitely a strong Wyrmprint, but it's not very universal because of that elemental limitation. Overall though, I would definitely be happy to summon it. And looking at the Wyrmprints as a whole, I do think that the real losers here are Trove of Knowledge and Roast Feast. Unfortunately, that does knock the showcase a little bit because those are on focus. However, the rest of the summons are going to be pretty good, and as we'll see with the dragons and adventurers, things are looking quite good there as well. So let's go ahead and move on to the first dragon, and this is going to be the 4-star focus, Vojanoi. Vojanoi is a water dragon who enhances strength by 30 or 45% once max unbound. He's a pretty good dragon. His stats are comparable to other aggressive 4-star dragons, so think of Rock, Ifrit, Lindworm, and Juggernaut. And the real comparisons are at 5-star, so you might not have access to those, and in that case, Vojanoi is going to be a pretty reliable pick to provide strength to a water adventurer. I do think that the new Winter Jeanne d'Arc and the old but good Leviathan will outclass Vojanoi if you have them. Even if you max unbind Vojanoi, you could eventually do the same with Jeanne and Leviathan because you can use Sunstones for that. So I do think those are overall better long-term investments, but Vojanoi is a very fine, good budget pick, and I definitely think that he adds to the value of the showcase. Now, one thing to consider is we did just get a new High Dragon trial, Hybernhilda. So for those of you who do have that in mind specifically, I will say that the HP provided by Vojanoi, you're going to need a lot to fight Hybernhilda. And depending on the adventurer you're using and your team comp, whether you have Zanefried and Karina, or just Zanefried or just Karina, there could be some risk into going too all in on Vojanoi. I know there's still some discussion about this, and I'm not an expert on it myself. So all I'll say is that there's some merit to Poliahu and even Poseidon from what I understand. That is something to consider, but for purposes like general content, your IOs, your other dragon trials, that type of thing, and this facility event, I think Vojanoi is going to be a great dragon. Moving on to the new dragon on the showcase, Jeanne d'Arc. This is her water form, and she's looking super cool. I love the artwork, and this is actually quite a unique dragon. This is a 5-star featured unit, and this time around, Jeanne d'Arc's blessing, or the Dragonyule blessing she has, enhances strength by 30 or 45% for a water adventurer, so that part is identical to what Vojinoy does, but she also enhances critical rate by 10 or 20%. Besides that, Jeanne's attacking skill also has an affliction associated with it, so it inflicts freeze, and I think she's a really great dragon. If you've really gone ham and have a maxed out Leviathan, or if you've just been investing into your Leviathan, I don't think you really need her. That critical rate is going to be most relevant, I think, on teams with a strong dagger unit. So once again, think of Cleo or Orsum, or maybe Luther. Luther's probably the weakest of those three, but Luther has the same co-ability as Orsum. So for critical rate purposes, he's okay. Besides that, I think in general, Bog and the higher strength provided by Leviathan are going to be a little bit more reliable. It's hard to say exactly how relevant that crit rate will be. It really depends on your team comp, your character comp, how much crit rate you're getting out of, say, a Wyrmprint you're using, but definitely not a bad dragon. And I like that we're seeing some experimentation with the blessings conferred by these dragons as well. So all in all, when it comes to the dragons, I think we have two good hits here. Either Jeanne or Vojinoy would be great summons. So the dragons look good, the majority of the Wyrmprints look good. But let's take a look at the adventurers, starting with Nefaria. She's one of 2 focus 4 stars. She's a water bow support unit, and she interacts with the energy mechanic, which we're seeing return on all 3 adventurers this showcase. So pretty cool to see that that's a continued mechanic, and we're going to get more support for it. Nefaria herself, however, is a bit tougher to evaluate. Her first skill is simple enough. Star Squall Shot deals water damage in a line. However, Special Delivery is pretty crazy, and without having used it myself, it's hard for me to make a firm judgment on this. Essentially, for the next 2 4 strikes used after Special Delivery is activated, they will grant a shield that nullifies damage below a certain HP threshold to nearby allies and increases those allies' energy levels by 1. So this is a wild way to give a shield to your allies. I'm really not sure if the wording means that you have to actually shoot your allies or near your allies with the Force Strike in order to give the buff, or maybe you have to use the skill when you're near your allies in order to give the buff. That part is very confusing, and just in general, this is not a super desirable skill to me. The energy itself is nice, but remember, you're going to need 5 energy to energize a skill, which means boosts its damage or recovery by 50%. So it takes a while to build up, and this skill also has a pretty high cooldown, and you're just getting 1 energy level to those nearby allies per use. So Nefaria by herself isn't going to be an energy engine for your team. You're probably going to want other energy units if you want to utilize that to its fullest. The shield could also be useful, but it's tough to say. I think a lot will come down to how demanding the positioning is on this. It's certainly interesting, but I can't say that it's super good. Unfortunately, it also clashes a bit with Nefaria's first ability of skill damage. That raw skill damage of 20 or 25% is generally a great ability, but because Nefaria only has 1 attacking skill in her base kit, even if it's her faster charging first skill, that is a little disappointing. And the burn res is fine. Flurry Freezer, though, I do like. This is only going to be accessible to Nefaria if you promote her to a 5-star, but basically how this works is, whenever your combo count exceeds 15 or reaches 15, your standard attacks gain a 10% chance to inflict freeze for 6 seconds. So I think this is a super cool direction to see. If you compare Nefaria to someone like Wake, you'll see that Wake's first ability is full HP equals Bog, and a lot of archers in the base game had abilities like this where if they were at full HP, their moves had a higher chance of inflicting a certain status ailment. But I think that was a really narrow ability, so I do like the flurry direction for status ailments. It's just that a lot will depend on how this actually works. The good thing is bow units have a lot of hits to each part of their basic attack combo, so it is pretty easy to reach that count of 15. The problem is, on crowded maps, you'll often have to roll around and get out of the way as a bow unit. Say if you were on an Imperial Onslaught map, you'd likely have to do that, and then this starts to look a little bit less good. It also depends on how exactly those hits register. So is it for each arrow shot, there's a 10% chance to inflict freeze, or is it that for each basic attack, attack, no matter how many hits are involved in that, you get that 10% chance. So depending on which of those two is the case, this could be really good or it could just be okay. I do like the direction. I think it's a creative ability and it gives Nefaria some identity. Compared to Wake in general, Nefaria's stats are better. Wake can inflict Bog, which is a pretty debilitating affliction. It slows bosses down and increases the damage you deal to them, so that is powerful, but I do think Nefaria overall comes out a little bit better, especially since they both have burn res, but hers is a higher amount. When it comes to building Nefaria, one of the big limitations, as I mentioned, is that she only has that one attacking skill. So I have steered away from skill damage here on the Wyrmprints. I think you'll want to do something that provides strength. So for a budget pick, Better Together gives you strength of 5% once max unbounds if your HP is above 70%. And if you have it, I do think Crystallian Envoy is a great choice for her. It's going to provide you a lot of strength when your HP is above 70%. And it also provides Flame Res, which as a water unit kind of fits Nefaria and suits the context where you take her quite a lot. For dragons, again, for that budget pick, Fojanoi is available to you. He's going to be easier to summon on this showcase. If you have Leviathan, or if you have Winter Jeanne d'Arc, they are going to be superior choices. They're going to provide more or an equal amount of strength, as well as critical rate in Jeanne's case, and more stats. So that just depends on what's available to you. As far as teammates go, I like Lily actually as a teammate for Nefaria. And you might wonder here and think Xander would be a better choice. One of the problems with the new Winter Xander is he has a different resistance than Nefaria. Actually, both Winter Cleo and Winter Xander resist stun, and for energy to work, you really don't want anyone on your team to get a status ailment because that resets your energy count back to 0. So I kind of like Lily also because she benefits from those shields. Lily wants to stay at full HP to get an extra strength boost as one of her abilities. She also provides skill damage and likes the skill haste, at least to some extent, provided by Nefaria. So since they both have burn res, that's why I kind of chose her here. I think that they make pretty good partners. You could also try Xander here and go for energy anyway. That's what I have in mind with Winter Cleo because even though she has stun res, she seems amazing for racking up energy and seems like a good teammate for Nefaria in that sense. Besides that, for weapons, I like the Frostlinger bow much more than Chimera's Guilt for Nefaria. The 4-star elemental Frostlinger bow is going to give Nefaria another attacking skill to take advantage of that innate skill damage ability she has, whereas Chimera's Guilt, which can be enhanced into the 5-star water elemental bow, enhances the user's critical rate, which isn't great by itself, and you're kind of missing out on that extra skill damage, which is unfortunate. Overall, I do think Nefaria is a bit hard to build as it stands. There could be some better options for her in the future. She seems like a unit with a lot of potential, but if she's one of your favorite units, you could always just slap her into a water team. Her stats, her being a natural 4-star, she is going to do decently well for you. Moving on from Nefaria, we come to the second focused 4-star on this showcase, and that's going to be Xander. The good thing about this is, even though these are both 4-stars, the appearance rates for each are set at what they'd be on a normal showcase, so really you're just less likely to pull an off-focus adventurer, and you're still just as likely to pull one of these as if they had been featured one by one or individually. As for Xander, this time around he is a wand unit, an attack type, and he's a 4-star, still water just like the normal Xander. As a wand unit, he provides that skill damage co-ability, and his first skill is similar to something like Amane in terms of its hit area, Starfrost well, but it also freezes the target and nearby foes. Xander's second skill, Monarch's Boon, increases his and nearby allies' energy levels by 1 and their strength by 10 or 15% once upgraded for 10 seconds. So overall, pretty good to see on a wand unit. I like that first skill, definitely comes out a lot quicker than Lily, who is Xander's main competition as the other wand water unit currently available to us. For abilities, Xander has Striker's Energy, which increases his energy level by 1 or 2 for every 3 enemies defeated with 4 strikes, up to 5 times per quest, and this is actually pretty potent in terms of increasing energy. On something like Flame Imperial Onslaught, you should be able to rack up 5 energy pretty quickly and enhance your Starfrost well. That's kind of nice to see, but it does depend on those ads being on the map. So for just boss fights, this is going to be totally irrelevant. Then Xander has stun res, which is good for the aforementioned Flame Imperial Onslaught. And finally, once promoted to a 5-star, Xander's going to get 5% skill haste, which seems a bit underwhelming. I can't imagine, you'd want to check the exact cutoffs, but I can't imagine that making a super huge difference in a given match. Maybe if you're using Xander with a bow like Nefaria, that will add up, and the extra skill haste, maybe with Jewels of the Sun as well, will start to matter, but it's hard to really say at a glance. Overall, Xander is pretty strong, pretty high strength, a good attacker, but Lily is that main competition, and Lily is good. The big difference is Lily has burn res and Xander has stun res, so in that sense they can kind of coexist. I do see Xander as being more suited for something like Flame Imperial Onslaught with stun res, whereas Lily, if she can survive, seems better for High Brunhilde because burning is a big issue. The other thing I like here though is they are differentiated by their first skill. Lily's is really slow to charge up, so there's a difference in their play style where Xander's is faster to charge, it's a smaller hit area as well. Overall, if you have Lily, I don't think Xander's anything to write home about, but he's a good unit. These natural 4-stars are never super bad. I don't think any of them in the game, in the gacha pool at least, are really bad, and Xander's no exception to that. So as for build ideas, Xander's definitely easier to build than Nefaria. I like the Wyrmprint better together on Xander. That's going to enhance his strength every time he defeats 3 foes with 4 strikes, which works perfectly with his Striker's Energy ability. It also enhances his skill damage, which works with his first skill really nicely. Besides that, I think he's another good candidate for Crystallian Envoy. The extra strength from that when your HP is high enough is really hard to beat, and it's easy to keep that HP as a wand unit. Also provides Flame Res, which is perfect fit for Xander, just like it was for Nefaria. Once again, the dragons, Vojinoi and Leviathan are listed, but Winter Jean is also good, Vojinoi being the budget pick. It really depends on what you have, but any of these dragons will be great for Xander. Now for teammates, Xander's a little bit more interesting than Nefaria in that he works pretty well with Karina and Winter Cleo, who both also have stun res. I like Xander with Karina because Karina scales her first skill off the buff she's received, and Xander can give her a buff with his second skill. Besides that, Winter Cleo, once again, she's great on all teams, interacting with energy in any way whatsoever. She's just a really powerful water unit, so you can't go too wrong having her on your team. And she has 2 attacking skills, which would benefit from Xander's co-ability. For weapons, the 5-star here is definitely preferred to the 4-star. The 4-star Rod of Tears only enhances Xander's defense, so unless you're using a strength double buff Wyrmprint like Valiant Crown or something like that, not super great for Xander. However, Welkin Wand, which can be enhanced into a 5-star water elemental, just does a straight attack, which is pretty powerful and could be enhanced with the energy mechanic to be even more powerful. Overall, I like Xander quite a lot. I think he's a bit better than Nefaria. At least he's a bit more straightforward to use, kind of less obtuse, and for that reason, I think for most players, he's going to be pretty easy to build. It is a shame that you can't use him with his normal version because they would make great teammates, but all in all, I think Xander is another good pull if you happen to get him. Okay, and now we come to the last focus adventurer on this showcase, and probably the most desired one, the 5-star focus adventurer Cleo. This time around, Cleo is a water dagger support unit, very different from her shadow healer form, and she has a pretty complicated first skill. So Starlit Gift deals water damage to enemies directly ahead, freezes them, and increases the energy level of the user and nearby allies by 1. It then has different phases, so the second time you use this, it'll also up team strength, and once you're in the 3rd phase, it'll also up team critical rate, and then the phases reset. So it's very similar to Halloween Elisanne for those of you who pulled her, where the next time you would use her skills, it would potentially increase your strength or heal your allies. That's a really good first skill to have. Dealing damage and freezing by itself, pretty good. You'd be happy if you saw that on a 4-star. But the extra bonuses of providing energy and having these different phases, it's hard to deny this is a really good skill. And then Cleo's second skill is just a straight attack directly ahead, making her pretty easy to build with a skill damage Wyrmprint. As for abilities, her first one is really good. HP of 70% equals strength. It's really easy to hit that 70% compared to full HP. HP. I think this is an amazing ability for her. She's going to have a deceptively high strength, even though her strength stat is pretty low as a support unit. Besides that, Cleo has Sun Res, and then she has a new ability where she'll get an increase in her energy level for every certain number of hits she deals. So for every 35 or once upgraded 30 hits, she's going to get an extra energy. That's going to make it pretty consistent for her to get up to 5, especially as a dagger unit. It's fairly easy to maintain a high combo count. So I think the idea with Cleo is you stick to one enemy. She'd be great for facing off against a boss and just try to continuously combo on them. With that first move on the daggers combo where you dart across the map, she's going to be great at chasing enemies, using her skills, and really racking up damage. I think she's very powerful. The closest comparison is to Orsum or Luther, but I've listed Luther here because Luther also has stun res just like Cleo, whereas Orsum has burn res. And you can see that in terms of co-ability, in terms of stats, Orsum is just a peg below Cleo. Overall, I think Cleo is kind of undisputedly better, stronger. Her abilities are more universal. It's mainly that stun res which poses a concern for her. If you're going up against High Brunhilde, you're probably going to need a Thaniel to cure burning because a lot of High Brunhilde's, pretty much all of High Brunhilde's moves seem to inflict burn. So that is the one limitation I would say of Cleo. It's kind of like taking Ezlith into High Midgard Sormer, but at least with burn you can kind of maneuver. It's just that it is a lot of damage and Thaniel isn't the greatest healer, so it's hard to take that and survive. Of course, I say that not having tested it fully myself, so keep in mind this is an early opinion and a little bit of speculation as to that High Dragon trial. All of that said though, Cleo is a great unit. Let's take a look at some build ideas for her. So like I said, for Wyrmprints, skill damage is going to do just fine. If you have a Plunder Pals that's been maxed unbound and fully leveled, that's going to be an amazing choice for you. But if you have a resounding rendition, that is pretty much strictly better, more stats, and a second ability to interact with criticals, which fits perfectly for Cleo since she's a dagger unit. I do also like the new Wyrmprint we talked about earlier, the Prince of Dragonyule. It's going to enhance her critical damage, and since she's a water unit, it's going to enhance her critical rate once she's got that flurry combo up. For dragons, pretty much the same as before. The only change I'd say is that I do like Jeanne d'Arc better for her than Leviathan. Since that critical rate really means something for her, she can get her critical rate quite high. So I do like that better for her than Leviathan. And as for teammates, I think Winter Xander is great, as I said on his build ideas page, but the more unconventional pick I'd suggest is Lucretia, and that is because both Lucretia and Cleo are powerhouses when it comes to pumping up energy. And the unfortunate thing is they don't have the same ailment resistance, so there is a risk that Lucretia is going to get inflicted with stun and not be able to utilize her energy. However, she can still enhance the energy of the rest of your team very effectively, and being a light unit, she doesn't have a weakness to anything. She has a neutral matchup against everything in the game. So I do think you can bring her along and she'd be a quite powerful teammate for Cleo. For weapons, here I prefer the 4-star weapon, Ultramarine Knife, because it gives Cleo another attacking skill. At 5-star, Treasure of the Iron Rose would give her another attacking skill, but this does not lead into the 5-star Water Dagger. The 5-star Water Dagger is a buff, and that's a little bit weaker in my opinion, so unless you really like Cleo, I think you'd be pretty well off with your 4-star. Unless you're going all the way and want to take on High Brunhilde, then maybe you need the 5-star just for the stats. Alright, and that covers every featured Wyrmprint, Dragon, and Adventurer on the new Dragonyule Defenders showcase. Overall, I like this showcase a lot. I would say it's a great showcase, and I've given it a score of 8 out of 10, with the idea being that there's 10 things given a rate up every showcase. Between Wyrmprints, Dragons, and Adventurers, they total to 10. And 8 of the 10 on this showcase, I think, are good to great pulls. The only 2 that I don't really like are the 3-star Wyrmprint, Roast Feast, and the 4-star Wyrmprint that's returning, Trove of Knowledge. So other than those 2, I think everything else on the showcase is a great pull. I do recommend that you summon if you're at all interested, because it's likely that it'll be quite some time, if at all, before these units return. Since this is a timed seasonal showcase, they're not going to be part of the normal summoning pool. However, if you've already heavily invested into your water team, if you have some really good water dragons like Leviathan already trained up, then you could consider skipping on this showcase. There's some consideration to a new showcase coming out with New Year's, but I personally think that we'll probably get a bit of a break and maybe we'll get a showcase for Lunar New Year instead. For me personally, I do have a pretty deep pool of water units, but I just love the alt here. I love the artwork, and I think that the value on this showcase is still pretty high for me because my water dragons are not the greatest. My Vojinoi could use some unbindings. I would love to get a Jean, so I do plan to summon. If you decide to as well, best of luck out there. Definitely let me know in the comments below what you think of this showcase, whether you'll be summoning, what you pulled if you did summon. I'd love to hear all about it. With that said, just one final reminder that the Gleam giveaway link is in the description below. I'm going to be bringing you some more Dragalia Lost content this week on the new event and on my summoning, so stay tuned for all of that. Until then, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.